This is far different from lifestyle evangelism. This is not keeping your lawn cut, not yelling at your kids in public, making sure your car is clean. This is revival. This is a change of heart which restores our love of God and our love of men, so much so that we become evangelistic in our efforts. And so in my study of business-like Christianity, I came upon this set of verses. And you'll notice the title is Call to Action. Call to action. This is a marketing term. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it as a phrase, but I'm sure you're familiar with it in practice. You're watching TV. A commercial comes on. And several times during that commercial, they say, "Call now, operators are waiting." And they flash the number across the screen. There's a big difference between awareness advertising and action advertising. I'll talk about Ford Motors, for instance, just because we need to pay Roger's retirement. When I was younger, Ford showed pictures of cars and trucks on TV. And you go, wow, isn't that something? But what are they doing now? Come in today for a test drive. Take the Ford Challenge. Drive one of our cars for 30 days and see if you don't fall in love with it. There's a big difference between trying to get me aware of the brand of Ford and trying to get me to buy a Ford. Local car dealers learned long ago not to do brand awareness. They want you to come in. They'll do all kinds of things. Those guys in Union City, I love their ads. They're always trying to get you to come in and get a hot dog and a free car. Have you ever heard a sermon, and at the end of the sermon, you said, "So what?" And have you ever been embarrassed because you said, "So what?" If you give me 15 or 20 minutes, and you listen, I think you'll understand why you say "so what," and you won't say it ever again. Sometimes the "so what" is because I've been a bad speaker. I confess, it happens. But most often, the "so what" comes because you've been a bad listener. My subject this morning is call to action. You see, the first Bible verse I have listed is in Proverbs 14 and verse 23. "In all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury," poverty. It was the Protestant work ethic which led to the quick building of America. It was teaching people that they should not be lazy, teaching people that they should work. That's what led to the building of our country. In fact, that led to the industrialization of the world, a work ethic. Those nations which have allowed laziness, those nations which have promoted socialism, where they rewarded all men equally and not those who worked advanced, those nations have fallen aside. I'm afraid that may happen to a nation that's very close to our hearts as well. We need to be very careful that we don't reward all men equally. God doesn't. God doesn't. All men are saved equally, but not all men are rewarded equally. And I want you to see this morning the work ethic of the book of Proverbs. Then I want you to see the work ethic of the New Testament. Then I want you to see that work ethic as it applies to us as hearers of the gospel. And then I want us to consider some application thereof. First of all, the work ethic as it is in Proverbs. And I've divided these verses into two sections, one having to do with sluggards and the other having to do with sloths. Nobody wants to be a slug, and nobody wants to be a sloth. Well, at least I think nobody does. Is there anybody here who'd love to be a sloth? Okay, we won't embarrass anybody. What's a sluggard? And you notice I said that's not a baseball term. That's not the guy who can hit home runs all the time. A sluggard is a lazy guy. Somebody who's a slacker. Somebody who's a loafer. Somebody who is a slug. You know those little slimy creatures? Ew. Does anybody ever eat those things? I gave up eating escargot because I only eat fast food. So slugs are really slow. Nobody wants to be a slug. One of my older kids got tired of people asking him what he wanted to be when he grew up. And so he came up with this line: I want to be a beach bum. He said nobody ever argued with him after that. And nobody knew how to respond. They just accepted it and went on to other conversations, often with other people. What do you say to the kid who wants to be a beach bum? Ah, we have an aspiring beach bum. Well, Samuel grew up in the hills of Pennsylvania. He had never seen the beach. And I guess he had watched too many Baywatch movies. And so he became in love with it. Sluggards, lazy people. The advice of the book of Proverbs is, go to the ant, thou sluggard, and consider her ways and be wise. Why? Well, because the ant works all summer, so the ant has something to eat during the winter. The sluggard, however, goes, I'll get around to it. Maybe I'll get around to it. The habit of sluggards is to sleep. Now, sleep when you're old is a good thing. You may not even know that you're sleeping. It just happens. Sleep when you're a baby is a good thing, so that you can stay awake and have more energy when you're crying the rest of the day. You need your sleep. We tell kids that. You need your sleep. Sometimes we say, take a nap, your mother's tired. Sleep, however, is associated with depression as well. The person who becomes frustrated with himself and with the life around him often spends hours and hours in sleep. Sometimes we sleep because we're exhausted. Sometimes we sleep because it's just hot. Sometimes we sleep because we have heart trouble and the blood doesn't pump like it used to. And because of lack of oxygen, our brain slows down, goes to sleep. But I'm talking about the person who wants to sleep rather than to be awake and work. The person who wants to be idle rather than to labor. That's the sluggard that the book of Proverbs condemns. A later verse, Proverbs 10, verse 26, says that the sluggard is like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes. Now, I try to stay away from vinegar as much as possible because I don't like the taste of it. And if you've ever been near a fire and gotten smoke in your eyes, you know how much that burns, and it lingers a long time afterwards. Have you ever known somebody who was like that? Somebody who just set your teeth on edge? Somebody that, just made you want to cry? That's a sluggard. If you've ever hired somebody like that, you wish you hadn't made that mistake. Have you ever been accused of being that? Oh, that's embarrassing. Teachers often accuse their students of that. You lazy no good, why don't you do your homework? I don't know. I don't have an excuse. For all those times that I didn't do my homework, I never really had an excuse. Sluggards, they want stuff, but they don't want to do anything about getting it. And they always have an excuse. Proverbs 20 and verse 4. The sluggard will not plow by reason of the cold. Oh, it's too cold. I'm not going out there to work. Oh. And guess what? If it's not cold, it's too hot. It's always something. It's too something. We can always find an excuse for not working. The sluggard, chapter 26 and verse 16, is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason. Oh, yes. They not only have an excuse, their excuse is a good one. I know that this is the right thing to do. That's the sluggard. The sloth is very similar. Do you know anything about sloths? It used to be thought that the sloth would climb up in the trees and only come down once a month. But we've since learned that sloths come down once a week. And anybody, you don't know? Sloths come down from the trees to go to the bathroom. Because if they went to the bathroom from up in the tree, it would make a lot of noise, and then their predators would find them. So they come down to the ground and they dig a hole and they go to the bathroom and then they go back up. And they spend 10 hours or more a day asleep in the tree, upside down. The hair on a sloth grows a different direction from the hair on a dog and a cat. Because they hang upside down, the hair grows the other way so that the water runs off. They're built for success. But they're sloths. Now, they didn't do this to themselves. God made them this way. But the human sloth will adapt to his environment. And he will not only come up with excuses, he will come up with ways that make it easier for him to be a sloth. They could be very good at. The sloth will never be free. Proverbs 12 and verse 24, the hand of the diligent shall bear rule, but the slothful shall be under tribute. Sloths don't appreciate fresh food. The book of Proverbs tells us that the slothful man won't even roast what he takes in hunting. If he would happen to go out and go hunting, and if he would happen to get something, oh, I'm just too tired to cook. Now, I'm sure you've said that. Those of you who are responsible for preparing meals, you've often said, I'm too tired to cook. Let's go out. Is that slothfulness? Oh, surely not. Surely not. Sloths are confused. Their way is hedged about with thorns. And the sloth wastes his time and his energy and his opportunity. Sloths are like a door turning on its hinges. Do you ever have trouble sleeping? I have no trouble sleeping at night. But I have trouble sleeping through the morning. And when the afternoon comes, oh man, I just have trouble sleeping all day. But the sloth doesn't have that problem. No problem. Just turn over. Go to sleep. He can do it. Sloths are too lazy to eat. They won't even lift their hand to feed themselves. Oh, I don't know how many times I've yelled at kids for not eating. How can you not eat? This is one of the great pleasures of life. And they don't appreciate it. They're just afraid to feed themselves. What would they rather do than work? Look at our first verse. In all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury. Kids love to talk at the table and not eat. Lazy eaters, the bunch of them. Sloths, like the sluggards, make excuses for their slothfulness. The sloth will say, oh, I'm afraid. There's a lion in the street. Really? Isn't that what the animal catcher is for? Don't we have hunters to chase down lions? Are you not prepared to defend yourself against a lion? Don't go to work. It's okay. So they always have excuses. They're so lazy, they won't maintain what they do have. Their land just falls to pieces. They don't take care of anything. And because they don't take care of it, it falls apart. Sloths sleep so much, they have trouble sleeping. The sloth is somebody who doesn't work. The sluggard is somebody who doesn't work. These are people who hear that they should work, but they don't. They're sluggards and they're sloths. For 1,000 years, there was a phrase called the 7 deadly sins. And sloth wasn't specifically mentioned in that, but the word which meant sloth was. And it wasn't until the 17th century that it actually became known as sloth, or slothfulness was the 7th deadly sin. By the way, it's not a biblical phrase. You'll be hard-pressed to find that list in the Bible anywhere. But the world is familiar with it. The world, if you've ever seen the movie Seven, there were 7 murders, and the people who were murdered, each of them was guilty of one of these 7 deadly sins. And there was a guy there who was a great big sloth. My concern is that the reason why we say "so what" at the end of the sermon is that we have become sluggards and sloths in our listening. And as I said earlier, it may be the preacher's fault, but it's always my fault if I say "so what" at the end of the sermon. Let me give you an example. Awareness advertising. You walk through the woods, and there's a tree, and on the branch is this long snake. And you look at it, and it's brown or black, and it has a diamond-shaped pattern all over it. That is awareness advertising. The snake is advertising, hey, I'm a rattlesnake. You should be aware that I am a rattlesnake. Okay, I'm aware. Action advertising. Same snake. He's no longer stretched out on the tree limb, but he's coiled. And there's this rattling sound in the air. Now that's action advertising. The awareness advertising says, I'm here. The action advertising says, you better do something. You better go away. Go the other direction. There's a big difference between action advertising and awareness advertising. Brand recognition and an immediate and direct response. The reason I say so what at the end of the sermon is that I haven't responded. I have treated that sermon only as awareness, an awareness of who God is, an awareness of what God expects of me, an awareness. But you know, every awareness in the world will do nothing to save you. It won't. And we'll see that in just a minute. I'll give you another illustration. A beautiful young lady walks into a room. She has well-fitting clothing and jewelry, an expensive perfume, and a well-made-up hair. That is awareness advertising. She wants you to be aware that she's in the room. Why else did she dress like that? Because she wanted to call your attention to her. But if she stops and blinks her eyes at you, that's action advertising. There's a difference. And how you respond should be different. Okay? If you're married and she's into action advertising mode, you go the other way, like this rattle of the Diamondback Rattler. If it's awareness advertising, you can say, so what? I'm not in the market. I'm out of here. The New Testament deals with the subject of work ethic. In 2 Thessalonians 3, verses 6 to 15, I think it's verse 10, which is the one which is most important to us. And that's the one that says, he who wouldn't work shouldn't eat. In 1 Timothy 5:8, it says, the person who doesn't take care of his family is worse than an infidel. And in 1 Corinthians 5:11, there's a long list of people of whom it says, you shouldn't eat with them. Let's take the Proverbs work ethic, which is there are lazy people and they should not exist. You move that into the New Testament, and we're told if there are lazy people in the church, don't eat with them. Now, nobody argues with that. Nobody has ever stood and said, in my presence, this brother is lazy, he refuses to work, I think we should supply all of his food needs. I've never heard anybody say that. I have heard people say, no, I think we shouldn't help this person because this person's lazy. And they need to understand their responsibility to work. And we all agree with that. So we have the work ethic from the Old Testament, which is affirmed by the New Testament. But I want to take it from a physical work ethic, and I want you to see how it applies in spiritual life. Turn with me to the book of James, please. James chapter 2. James 2, we begin in verse 14. What doth it profit, my brethren, though a man say he hath faith, and hath not works. Can faith save him? If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, Depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled, notwithstanding you give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doth it profit? Even so, faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. Yea, a man may say, Thou hast faith, and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. Thou believest that there is one God, thou doest well. The demons also believe and tremble. But wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead? Read the rest of the chapter. Faith without works is dead. Anybody disagree with that? Here's the solution to your so what problem. Faith without works is dead. I preach for 25 minutes. You say, so what? The answer is, what do you believe? From what we've read in the scriptures, all right, this is the practical application, by the way. From what we've read so far, what do you believe is true? Now, what will you do about it? Because faith without works is dead. You tell me you believe that you should work. Fine, do it. You tell me that faith without works is dead. Okay, show me how you're going to do something about this new knowledge that you have of God, or his revelation of himself, or his revelation of how he wants you to live. What are you going to do? Faith without works is dead. You will never again say, so what, at the end of the sermon. Because from this day forward, you will realize your responsibility to remember those scriptures and to say, yes, Lord, what would you have me to do? This is not awareness advertising. You don't come to church just to increase your awareness of who God is. God expects us to be doing something. He expects us to be living for him. A lazy man should not eat. I am not to eat with a lazy man. This morning, following our 10:30 service, as part of our service, as part of our worship, we're going to sit at the Lord's table. We are going to eat. The early church ate daily, from house to house. Do you deserve to sit at this table? Should I put myself at this table? Should we eat with one another? Or should we say, he who is lazy doesn't deserve to eat? Should we examine ourselves and say, Lord, I haven't been doing what you want me to do? I'll give you one example and then I quit. Jesus said to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Do you believe that? Do you believe it? That's faith. Do you do it? That's works. Faith without works is dead. We talk often about people in dead churches. We talk about people who have dead theology, dead orthodoxy. But I fear that too often we are just as guilty. We are dead in our sloth and sluggardness. May God forgive us.